Hello, everyone, and welcome to That Eurovision Podcast, Eurovision with a Slice of Life. I am your host, Helen, and today I am joined by Shiloh and Ben. How are you both doing?
Hi, I'm Shiloh. I use he, him pronouns, and you can find me on Twitter at iSunshower. I am doing fine, I guess. It is fall where I am, which is East Coast US, so I am looking out my window and the leaves are fun colors finally, so that's nice.
Hi, I am Ben, also use he, him pronouns. It's finally getting cold again, so I'm freezing in my apartment right now I'm in the Midwest of the U.S., which is best of both worlds. In the summers, you get the blazing heat, and in the winters, you get freezing cold. It's lovely.
Yeah, I'm doing well. It is currently about 7 o'clock where I am, so we're doing a bi-coastal recording, if you will. I've been doing good. It's also getting to be fall here. I broke out my winter coat, which I was very sad about. And everything's starting to get going. Eurovision season is upon us. Looking at my train tickets to Liverpool to make sure the prices stay affordable. And also skating season is back, which is real fun for me. So lots of junior ice dance. Anyways, so you may have noticed from our various accents that we are all, in fact, American. And yes, this is entirely on purpose. It's no secret that the Eurovision Song Contest has grown exponentially in the last 15 to 20 years especially. And that means that people in other parts of the world have caught on, including the good old US of A. And, in fact, it has caught on enough that we now have our own American spinoff, the American Song Contest. So, of course, it means that a whole gang of us Yankees have invaded the team at that Eurovision site and have taken over today. So, today, the three of us are going to have a chit-chat about our own journeys to the contest. So, we'll talk a little bit about how we first heard of this little thing called Eurovision, a little bit about why we fell in love with it, and what we think of our country's evolving relationship to the contest. So, basic start. How did you guys first find out about Eurovision, and do you remember the first entry you ever watched?
For me, I think my very, very first introduction to Eurovision was also running into Conchita Wurst on YouTube when I was like 14. But I was properly introduced to Eurovision actually by my German teacher shortly before the 2016 contest. And so I think the first entries that I ever saw a video of were, it would have been either Satellite by Lena, You Are the Only One by Sergei Lazarev, or Ghost by Jamie Lee. Those are the ones that I remember us watching in class. I just don't remember what was first. And I got hooked pretty instantly. The contest was like a couple of weeks later, and I watched the second semifinal live on the EBU website back when we could still do that from the States. And it's lived rent-free in my mind ever since.
So I want to start off. I take particular offense calling me a Yankee, considering I'm a Southerner right here. Rude. But my intro to the Eurovision Song Contest is kind of weird, and I have two answers to how I found out. So, I first heard of what it was back in 2014. I was a young kid on YouTube all the time. I remember seeing just that gorgeous bearded lady on my little thumbnail recommendations, being like, what is this? Little closeted me being afraid to even click on the videos. Then also around the same time, a YouTuber I like called Tom Scott, he did a video from Copenhagen inside the arena, talking about the math that goes behind the tie-break system. It's very weird. That's the first time I was ever exposed to it. But then when I actually started to look into the songs, was around 2018, 2019. I've also always been I watch a lot of British television, so I was watching the Big Fat Quiz of the Year for that year, and there was a question on Netta, and I was like, this is really interesting. What is this song? And then it went all downhill from there. I got really obsessed with this contest. Toy still holds a really big place in my heart, even though it may not be my winner from 2018. It's just like it's a really special song to me now because like that's what really got me into this contest. It's a random video that about watching about Toy and people making fun of the chicken song that I now really love.
Yeah, my first introduction to Eurovision, a thing that you'll know about me is typically all roads will lead back to One Direction. That is how it is, painfully waiting for the reunion. But so I also got introduced to Eurovision in 2014. And the reason was because I had a lot of One Direction friends on Twitter, and they posted pictures of Conchita, and they said, it's Zayn in the Best Song Ever video, where he also dresses up in drag. And I think this would have been the semifinal, because I had only seen the pictures but hadn't seen the show. And then Saturday came around. I was in my freshman year of college at the time, and I had to go out to do something, but came back and there was a link to it. I think I watched it on the Eurovision website. And I tuned in about halfway through. So the very first entry that I saw in full, I missed Conchita. I watched, I think it was either Sweden's Undo or France's twin with mustache. And I like to think it was France. I'll have to check on the running order for that one. But I mean, it's a perfect encapsulation of what I was in for. And so I watched through the end. I watched through the voting. And at first I didn't quite understand why Conchita was in the lead, because I hadn't seen her. I hadn't actually seen the performance and thought like, this has to be a joke entry. And at that time I was also very much discovering my own queerness, and I went to a Christian college. So a lot of stuff I found out rather late, including the art of drag. So it's a testament to where I was at that time. But I did remember it, and my friend and I actually resolved to watch it the next year. However, in 2015, it happened after I had come home from school, so I couldn't actually watch it with my friend. But it was streaming on YouTube, and so I could watch it. And I think that was the last time it was streaming on YouTube, because next year Logo got the rights. But 2016, I was actually in the UK on a study abroad. I think I was going home 2 days after the contest aired, but I went to like a church youth group that my friends were going to just because I needed like somewhere to watch. I only knew 2 people. And then the next year I said, oh, there's semifinals. I should watch those. And I was obsessed. Just after 2017 happened, I went through like the YouTube archives, was looking up all like the, all UK results in the Eurovision Song Contest, all of those videos. Thank you, Schlager Lucas, for your good work. And I was sold. So yeah, I guess we've already gotten into a little bit of it. But Eddie, can you pinpoint the exact moment that you kind of became like a super fan as opposed to just someone who tends to just watch because they're interested?
So at the time that I first discovered Eurovision, I was very active on Tumblr. I still am, but the internet in 2016, very different landscape. And I went into the Eurovision tag on Tumblr. And there were a lot of people who, if you go into the tag around contest season, there are people who only talk about it seasonally, but I found like a group of other Eurovision super fans, and that summer we did a lot of stuff together. Like somebody made a Discord server, and we played like the Cards Against Humanity online game, but like Eurovision themed, or Eurovision like Tumblr Eurovision fandom inside joke themed. And I was just surrounded by people who already cared about things like the national finals and who were organizing fan contests and stuff like that. And so it came very naturally. I can't really point to one specific moment and be like, this is it. But it was like that summer because I was just absorbed very quickly by this group of people.
So I can very much pinpoint the moment because it was whatever the day of the MGP final in 2020. That was the first time I'd ever watched a national final, and I I was like in my dorm room just sitting there because I was like, oh my god, I love all of this so much. And that was a very chaotic final, if you remember, because it was after Kaino happened, Norway wanted to go to televote only, remove all of the jury from MGP. And their voting system crashed during the final. And I was a very big fan of Rain Alexander that year, and he was supposed to have gone to the final. When they did a poll on one of their big magazines later, he was like the #1 fan favorite at the time. But he didn't. And so I was already in the throes like, oh my god, this is so chaotic. And then I hear Attention, and it's like, oh my god, I love this song. And then that just started the downward spiral, or upward spiral, if you will, of just me then going further in depth and looking on Twitter to see like, oh my, people are actually ranting about this as well. I'm not the only one upset. And then loving Attention, and I got further into Eurovision Twitter afterwards and became into that community. Then COVID happened, which was like sitting down every week to watch the home concerts. And like that MGP final still has a place. That's why I'm also a big Norway stan. It's like the first one I ever watched, the first one that really got me into it. And then MGP's chaotic is every year, and I love the chaos of it. It's so beautiful, but that one show is amazing.
I think 2018 for me was when I realized how far into it I was, because by the time 2018 rolled around, I had found like the Eurovision podcasts all to listen to. I'm a big fan and now friends of the guys at the Euro, Mike and Ben, incredible. But I think 2018 was like, I'm actually arranging my work schedule around this. I worked for my parents at that time, so I had a bit of a flexible work schedule. But because the semifinals in particular were on in the afternoon at about 3 p.m., and I typically didn't finish until 4 o'clock, I actually got on my delivery route, I think an hour and a half earlier each day. I got up at 5 a.m. so I could get my work done in time to go home. So that was that experience. And then that was also the first time that I got to watch it with my family. And see how they reacted to it. And I mean, especially when you're explaining it to somebody new, explaining how the points work, because they were home for the voting sequence was interesting. But then 2018 was also 3 months after that contest. I ended up moving to the UK, and I've been here ever since. And it's hard to be a Eurovision fan in the UK, or at least it was until very, very, very recently. And it still is. To all the locals listening, no, I don't know how you can get tickets. I'm sorry. And also, I wouldn't give you that information if I did, because I want to go. We can cut that. But yeah, I mean, I started blogging about Eurovision. My husband and I, before I joined the team at that Eurovision site, like did like a whole like ranking of songs for 2021 that we ended up not doing because it was way too much of a burden to edit. But I mean, it's kind of our thing that we share, which I very much enjoy. That being said, he probably also will not be taking a week off like I will next year. So anyways, let's see. So as a country that has no stake in the main contest yet, why do you think Eurovision appealed to you as an American?
The history aspect was definitely a big thing for me too. I don't have a personal stake in it the way you do, but I have always really liked history and politics and stuff. I took AP history classes all 4 years of high school. And I was very fascinated by the way that relationships between countries like play out in Eurovision, and the way that countries show their different cultures and different sides of themselves in Eurovision. I go into way more depth about this in the academia episode, but basically I really liked it. And that's also like part of what I use when I sell it to other people too. Actually, one of the first like in-depth conversations I had with my ex-girlfriend, who's a political science major, was we watched Eurovision together in 2021. And I was like, well, Italy is sending a song in Italian, and Italy always sends a song in Italian, but not everybody does that. And so this has implications for the stuff they're gonna like, other countries are gonna send down the road. And so I also have a lot of fun explaining that to people. because it makes me feel smart.
So when I started getting really into the contest 2019-ish, like when I first just started really delving into like all the winners and adding them to my playlist, it was in a spot where like background, I'm a band kid. I've always been a band kid. I'm a saxophone player at heart. And my senior year of high school, 2019, was when we got a new band director who was a very horrible human being, very racist, sexist, very homophobic, all of the above. Very bad person, trying to basically destroy my like of music. And I was then, that was, Eurovision became kind of my escape and like how I can then dive into different kinds of music and all these different styles and genres, and it was my musical escape. I always have had that back from when it was either me playing an instrument or now just listening, and then nowadays that's even transitioned to me arranging pieces on. I'm learning piano because I can't play saxophone in a small apartment. My neighbors would very much dislike that. Then yeah, it was that was what really drew me. And then it changed from just like, oh, I need a musical release to then I'm now discovering almost participating in all these new cultures that I'm observing and learning about. Like my favorite band of all time now, Kaino. I would never have known about the history of the Sami people and delved into all that depth and beautifulness without this contest. And that's a part of me that I've really loved, learning all these new cultures and then connecting somewhat with my own as well, because my family came to the US about the late 20s and 30s, and they were Eastern European Jews, which means they quickly assimilated into US culture and abandoned everything because it's a very anti-Semitic time in this country's history. And also, if you were speaking an Eastern European language like Belarusian, the country not being super friendly even still at the time to people from Eastern Europe, they very quickly learned English, very quickly abandoned all of that. So my family just like abandoned all of that for themselves. The only thing left was the Jewish part, not even the Eastern European side of it. Then so I get to see now all the beautifulness of Eastern European culture, like White Voice and people like Navi Band and Val singing in Belarusian and amazing songs. It just allows me to explore all that, which I really love.
I think for me, part of it is because Eurovision is so different from a lot of things that I grew up with. I was definitely one of the grew up Christian, watching Disney and VeggieTales, and that was about it. Listening to, wholesome stuff. Not like as far down as other people are, but definitely part of that culture. And I think in particular, like American culture, in my opinion, tends to be quite insular, although I think that is slowly starting to change. And so, I took social studies classes and history classes and whatnot, but they tended to be very America focused. And if we're talking about other parts of the world, it's very much in the past. And so Eurovision, when I first got onto it, first of all, even watching in 2014, there were countries that I had not heard of, even because like when you think of Europe and you've been brought up in the American education system, you know the big ones, your France, your Great Britain, Spain, Portugal, all of them, but you don't necessarily know about like smaller countries or even where those countries are. Ben's pointing to his San Marino. um, so that's yes. Yeah. So what I pitch, this is a spoiler for a later topic we'll get into, but I liken it to like the world's most fun like social studies test. Um, and even if countries come in and out year on year, there's still like so many cultures, and especially now, I'm so excited that we don't have a language rule in place anymore, and yet more and more nations are starting to gravitate towards using their national languages again, which is incredibly exciting. Like, I'll just be like, I really like this song from Serbia this year. I don't understand what she's saying, and you don't need to enjoy it. I mean, she put subtitles on during her performance, but still, I think it's such a emblematic of what's happening just in general on the US charts right now. Although, you know, because I think like 15 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined something like almost everything on the charts is in English in the US, give or take, like, you know, like a few, you know, Spanish superstars. And then you had things like, not to go back to 2012, but like, you know, Gangnam Style got popular on the charts. That wasn't in English. And then Despacito like got popular on the charts and wasn't in English. But the funny thing is, it's like, I already listened to like a lot of stuff that's not in English because of Eurovision. Have I completed a Duolingo course in any language? Not really. But I think one of the things, because like I learned so much by watching this contest about not just the musical culture and what goes on, but then just about what's going on in these countries in general. And I've now, of course, left the US for reasons. This is a way to get people to think more outside their own boundaries, country, I guess. America is America-centric, very much so, especially in Michigan.
Yeah, that geopolitical aspect is something I forgot. Like, I really do love as well, because I am a big politics nerd. I may be an engineer, but I still love that part of the social sciences. And it's fun going up to some of my friends who have no idea about it, and it's like, did you know Iceland has a $30 million gap in their budget just in case they win Eurovision? Or, like, that's the country of San Marino. Their entire, like, foreign policy budget essentially just goes to Eurovision. Like, that's how some countries advertise themselves. And it's fun telling my friends that from the US, who are like shocked at how big some countries actually make the contest out to be. And there's actual geopolitical struggles that are affecting the results, and the results also go back into affect different geopolitical struggles.
People get so impressed too sometimes. I knew someone at college who was from Romania, and I mentioned something about Eurovision to her one time, and she gets all excited, like, oh, like nobody knows what that is. Nobody even knows where Romania is. And so I'm like, now I know things. That feels nice.
Yes, one of my friends is from Greece, and she was like, oh my god, wait, you know Elena Paparizou? Like, what is this? Like, yeah, of course I know Elena Paparizou. Number one, Antique is like one of my, it's in my ESE 250. One of my favorite songs in the contest. Of course I know her. Then we go on a conversation about, oh my god, Greece is doing so bad in the contest. This was like after 2019, so not with after Die Together. So, like, yeah, going off of how bad Greece was doing and how they can fix it. And yeah, Europeans get really shocked in this country when you know about Eurovision, and especially to the level that probably most of us know Eurovision, being able to name like winners so far back and whatever, how many, Kano getting 291 points randomly off the top of my head. Like, you get really shocked when you know it. It's really fun to see their faces.
I mean, I live in a country that participates in Eurovision, and I get that reaction a lot. So, which is going to be real fun next year. Oh, yeah. One of the most surreal moments for me was when visiting home this summer is when I was my parents rented a boat so we could go out and have a nice little day on one of the lakes in Michigan. We have those. And so one of the most shocking moments was like all the boats are clustered up and I hear someone playing Måneskin's Beggin' on the radio, which granted is not an actual Eurovision song, but got big off of Eurovision. And so it's just like, this is just in the culture now. Yeah.
I heard arcade at the grocery store back in New Orleans, and I'm like, what is, I knew it went popular in TikTok, like, hearing this in public nowadays is so wild. Like, I just want to go, I knew this song before it was popular in this country, you kids.
A similar thing happened to me with Davi Freyr when Think About Things got big on TikTok in like early 2020. I was like, none of you people know about Songvakeppnin. I have known who this man was for 3 years.
Oh yeah. My mom is the one who sent me the TikTok. I think it was like Jennifer Garner of like just like doing laundry while dancing to Think About Things. And I was just like, Mom, this is a Eurovision song. Or like my mom mentioned like she heard like Snap on the radio the other day. And I was just like, thank you. I take full credit for that.
some of my friends try to trash on Eurovision because, like, they do. The Americans in the UK still share a culture when it comes to some things, and trashing on Eurovision is one of them. And my roommate likes to do the same thing, and he heard Snap and liked it. And in my face when I was like, "Do you know that was a Eurovision song?" It was like him trying to then back, like, "No, I don't like this song." Oh no, like, yes, you do. Of course, you do.
The fact that Chanel's management didn't immediately try to push slow-mo to like summer radio over in the US is beyond me. They missed it. But that's just me. So on the subject, we went on a little bit of a tangent, but I do want to talk about an issue that is particular to American Eurofans, and that is streaming woes. So a little bit of a history on Eurovision being broadcast in the US. We didn't have an official broadcaster until, I believe, 2016. And before that, you could either stream it online through the EBU's website, and then I think at least for 1 year on the Eurovision YouTube channel in the US. However, Logo TV picked up the rights in 2016, and that meant that any and all Eurovision content was geo-blocked in the US going forward, which was a real shame to me. The funny thing about that particular year was, presumably, they had Justin Timberlake as an interval act to appeal to the American audience. But because of copyright issues, the American audience did not see him. So that's hilarious. I did get to see him do, I think it was his song from Trolls, which, whatever. So from 2016 to 2018, it was broadcast on Logo TV, which is a bit of a nightmare because I don't have cable. And then in 2019, I forget what happened in 2019, but I think Netflix got the rights, but they only put it on their platform 2 months something later. And I think they would have had the 2020 contest, of course, which did not end up happening, but they did have a Eurovision movie come out, which I did watch. I have not watched in 2 years. It's fine. Could little less Will Ferrell. That would have been nice. But in 2021, about a week before the contest itself, I think, actually happened, Peacock said, we have the rights. And we have the rights to the semifinals. Because I think before that, no US network that had the rights actually bothered to broadcast them. So that was exciting. Of course, I was in the UK by this point, so I was watching the BBC. Actually, no, I was watching the Swedish feed because I didn't like Graham Norton's commentary at the time. But God bless you, SVT. Thank you for not geo-blocking your live streams. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that we've had all of our streaming woes of watching the contest, but also being able to watch back performances. So this is the section where we get to air our frustrations about that. Take it away.
Oh God, having to pay $15 a month just so I can watch back any contest. And that's just if that's for the VPN. If I wanted to go back and like legally watch it, still probably the same price for Peacock without ads. They shouldn't have to do that, especially because they don't broadcast NBC doesn't put on Peacock the previous years. They only have 2021 and 2022. They don't have before, but they're still geo-blocking it, even though they still have the rights to those years. And I don't know. The EBU's reasoning for it is they can't find proper allocation, I think, for the money it would make there, which makes zero sense because YouTube has what they call their content ID system. Basically, it's an fully automated system that will go and scan videos and will copyright claim for the holder. And you can do it based on country. You can fully go, NBC can get the rights and get the payment from here, from what I've been told at least. And because you can geo-block as well in certain countries like the US. But NBC doesn't do that. NBC doesn't really like putting their stuff on YouTube because they don't see the monetary value it has. Like the American Song Contest, I also have to use a VPN to watch because they took the videos down. They only, I think, have Alexa's performance up or something. And probably because she put it on her own YouTube channel. And so I have to then use a VPN to watch our own country's contest because it's up on European YouTube, but not on American YouTube. And the streaming is okay. I like our commentator was actually okay. Johnny Weir, he's an American figure skater. Wasn't that bad. You could tell like it wasn't like when they had Carson or Ross Matthews and Michelle Visage, who had never seen the contest and didn't care about the contest, watching it and commentating on for Logo. He actually is a fan and actually cares. And you could tell that he was a good commentator. But the blocking everywhere else, NBC, call me, text me. We need to have a word on that, please.
He's a better Eurovision commentator than he is a figure skating commentator. I will say that much. I quite enjoyed it. I did get to watch the American. When I visited home, I did watch the contest with my family, and I did get to watch the Peacock version. And I quite liked him. He was very respectful. He didn't talk through the non-competitive performances like even Graham Norton is prone to that. So
I get around the streaming thing, the current contest thing, by watching through the German site. So like I said before, I first discovered Eurovision from German class. I speak German. The German stream is not geo-blocked. They have archives going back to, I think, 2014. And their commentator, Peter Urban, great. I like him. I think he's funny, even though when I watch it with other people who don't speak German, I have to like translate his jokes and they're like not as funny when they're in English. So that's how I get around that. One of the funny things about YouTube. So for the website, like for the That Eurovision site website, when we write an article about a country, we have to put their most recent entry in to the article. And I can't do that. Tim and Rory always have to go edit my articles because I can't access the videos because they're geo-blocked here. Which I feel kind of bad about. Now there are like links that I can just copy and paste and it will be like, you can't watch this video, but it's still embedded. But like originally they had to go and add them because I just could not get the videos at all. I have not watched on Peacock. I tried in 2021 with a friend and it didn't work. And so we wound up watching the German stream instead. And I did not watch the American Song Contest. I have thoughts about it. But I know we're going to talk about it later, so I'm going to hold those. But yeah, I mean, for countries and participating countries who don't geo-block their streams, my beloved, makes my life so much easier. Also Helen's life, apparently. So...
Oh, on the video embeds and articles. When I was doing the first few American Song Contest ones, I was putting what NBC put on their website or on YouTube for the American audience. And then I go back just to edit the article to update it when they announce the new qualifiers next week. I see, why can't I access this video? Because then it went back and edited it because they thought I put a different video in. But it was just the American and British videos that NBC published, or at least the European ones, were completely different, but on different channels. Like, so I couldn't watch the more American Song Contest when there was another one I put earlier into the video, into the article, like, from that. It was like, wait, what is happening here, NBC? NBC Universal is a beast. Like, also, I know Wiley, the Finnish broadcaster, I don't think blocks some of their streams, and they have a lot of times a no commentary option, which is very nice. They do it at least for UMK. I'm not fully sure for Eurovision. I think they do though.
I will say, as it relates to watching in the UK, because we still actually, I mean, we have a broadcaster that broadcasts it, but we decided a while back that at least until this year when we went out and watched it with a bunch of people that we didn't really like Graham's commentary and he was trying to he was punching down kind of. So we would watch the Swedish feed, or we tried to watch the YouTube feed, which was not geo-blocked in the UK until last year. And even when it wasn't geo-blocked, it was very pixely because presumably everybody else was doing the same thing we were. But yeah, I'm torn because I live in a country that does broadcast Eurovision, but they haven't done it particularly well. So I'm cautiously optimistic for next year, especially considering we're hosting it. It's a position I didn't think we would be in for even 2 years ago, even before the no plan. But yeah, no, definitely when I was still living in the US, streaming was an issue. Like 2017 came around and I was like, how am I going to get the local broadcast? What am I going to do? What's going to happen? Because and I had like the Swedish feed on backup, but it's like, which feed do you watch? Because you don't know what's going to cut out on you and, you know, what's going to get geo-blocked and everything. And it's a nightmare. Yeah, so EBU, fix that, please. Also, maybe maybe don't put it on a broadcast network in the US because you would have to deal with commercials, which presumably is why it was hard to sell the rights for so long. Because the US loves their ads. I do not miss the political ads, I will say. So, speaking of the American Song Contest, I guess we do have to touch on it a bit. It just had its first season this year, and I believe as of recording, there's not yet confirmation of a season 2, but I believe they are trying to make it happen. So there's a lot of things to talk about, but in particular, do you think this was successful at adapting a contest that we love to an American format or an audience? And why or why not?
It had its growing pains. So for all you listeners, if you read a single article on our website that was about the American Song Contest, there's about an 85% chance that was me. I was the correspondent, essentially. And I can never say Kelly Clarkson will ever do wrong. Where you all roads lead back to one direction, they lead back to Kelly Clarkson for me. I love the woman, and I think hosting top-notch. Kelly Clarkson and Snoop Dogg were a duo that does not sound like it should work, but they are probably one of the most hilarious and amazing. Kelly Clarkson, there was one moment, it was, I think, with Wisconsin. She was wearing a cheese hat, and she was just plain face going, "Y'all, I'm turning half of America on right now." And I just started dying because she is just so nonchalant. She's the type of funny where she doesn't know she's funny, and she's starting to learn that. And I love that woman. She could host anything. NBC stands for nothing but Clarkson at this point because she's back on The Voice. She has her thing. She has the American Song. I hope if there's a season 2, they bring her back. That's that. The hosting, top-notch job. The point system needs some work if there's a season 2. We saw from the final, the second place, Colorado, Riker Lynch, Field of Love, was, I think, second to last or last with the jury and second in the televote. They did a 75-25 split, so the televote had a majority, which was good. They didn't the juries were very, very biased towards country and ballads. We think the Eurovision, we joke the Eurovision jury is also biased towards ballads, but if you saw how that jury voted for the American Song Contest, extremely ballad biased, like ridiculously, and country. Like every jury winner was almost a country boy singing some sad song, and then all the other meaningful songs were kind of left by the wayside for some reason. The jury selection needs to change. However, they just did iHeart executives and local radio station people change that up. The songs, I think, were really good. There were some duds, but there were a lot of really good ones. I mean, even we now have an artist who, by the time this goes out, is in about 30 minutes, that article should go out, about Inisa from New York. She was considered by Montenegro, not considered, she was going to represent Montenegro before they withdrew, before, like, I'm guessing the price of competing increased. They had her on contract, and she We currently don't know, but she's been hinting there's another chance she's going with someone, possibly Albania. Hopefully by the time that this comes out, she can represent someone. Like, they did well picking. They did well in the production of the show. There were growing pains in how the show was hosted, but they got worked out. It has Christer Bjorkman behind it. The show won't be badly produced. Christer Bjorkman knows how to do a show, and he adapted it. He adapted it, I think, very well. But if they just work out that issue of that jury qualifier, the jury itself, like, I know juries are always a punching bag, but like, it was actually bad how the jury voted. I think a season 2 could be really good. And also move the time slot. Don't have it competing with American Idol every. Like, Idol hasn't had the traction it had before, but don't have it competing with American Idol. Like, they had to push it back, I know, but it was in a horrid time slot at that time as well, which didn't help its ratings.
I did not watch the whole season all the way through, but I did watch, I think, the qualifiers, and I did watch the entry from my home state because I wanted to see if they were going to try to beat Southern, and they did. And they sent discount Taylor Swift, bless her. But the thing that I've always been worried about, and I did discuss this a little bit when it was confirmed that the American Song Contest would be happening back before I joined the site. I was on the Eurowhat for a sec where we quote screamed into the void about this, but we were wondering, America has this tendency to, rather than broadcast international programs that people loved in their original iterations, they tend to, instead of showcasing those programs, try to adapt it for themselves. And ironically enough, American Idol is the prime example of that, I think. I think The Office is another one in a different way that ended up really working. But a lot of times it doesn't work. So one of my big worries about the American Song Contest is trying to make this big, huge, wonderful, joyous Eurovision that we love, that has had time to really evolve and expand with over the course of 60 years, and then trying to take a format that's that old and then impose it brand new on a new audience. And going back to the streaming woes, my first thought was like, can we get like the broadcasting of the real contest out of the, like, sorted out first before we convert it to American? That'd be great. But I think with any show in its first season, I think there's always going to be a bit of growing pains. I think if you look, back at something like that has become a cultural staple, like American Idol, you can look back at that first season, which, yes, did have Kelly Clarkson as the winner, but you can see it's still a show that's in its infancy, and things would, grow into the ways that we know it is as time goes on. And I do hope that the American Song Contest gets that chance. And my overall hope for the American Song Contest would be for people to see, like, wow, this is really interesting. We don't really think of things that way, like, state versus state. Unless you're Michigan and Ohio, then boo. But my hope for that, people see the American Song Contest and are then encouraged to go and check out, like, actual Eurovision. Because I feel like some people might think, like, oh, we have an American version of this, we don't need to watch the original version. But, they can go hand in hand. And, we have Eurovision Canada coming up. We have Eurovision Latin America hopefully happening. So it really, I think for a long time that Eurovision Asia was going to happen. We don't know if that's going to be so much the case now. But I think it does have a global reach. And I think it does a little bit go back to the U.S. kind of being a bit of an insular country, a little bit of an isolationist country. So if more people are encouraged to check out Eurovision, which is something that is just by name not super American, then I think the American Song Contest will have had one of its successes.
So I've got two things to say about the American Song Contest. Thing number one, So I am from Pennsylvania. I am from right outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which means that I do not have a lot in common with the rest of Pennsylvania. I like I don't have like any kind of like regional loyalty really. Like we make fun of New Jersey over here, but also I have more in common with people from New Jersey than I do with people who live 2 hours away from me in the other direction in Pennsylvania. And so I feel like the problem with the American Song Contest is that there are going to be places in the US that just don't have a lot of state loyalty. And I know that this is different in different places. I went to college in New England, and in New England, it's like, like Massachusetts hates Rhode Island and New Hampshire hates Vermont and all that mess. But it's not like we don't really have I don't identify as a Pennsylvanian, yeah. And my second thing is I think, so I actually heard more about the American Song Contest from the K-pop scene than I did from anybody into Eurovision, because the winner from Oklahoma, Alex Christine or Alexa, was on a K-pop survival show back in like 2018. Which there are like fascinating overlaps between K-pop and Eurovision in terms of like competing and nation branding and the types of music and things like that. But I was in a funny position because I had some friends from college who were into K-pop, and they knew who Alex Christine was. I guess Alexa is like the name that she like makes music by, but she was Alex Christine in the survival show, which was the only thing I actually watched. All talking about like, oh yeah, Alexa's in this contest. It's like, it's the American version of something called Eurovision. I'm like, okay. Yeah, so it was a funny marketing thing and a funny cultural thing for me, because I was hearing about the American Song Contest from a lot of people who were not American. I had, I had friends in like, Serbia and France and Sweden and stuff who were watching because they knew her from this one show.
Yeah, that's something I think NBC didn't do too well, was the marketing. They did a Super Bowl ad thinking it'd be enough. Like, what the marketing goes to a lot in those song contests is the older generation, because those are the ones who watch more TV, who go towards the ratings, and who really do watch the song contest more, is the 35 to 50-ish age market, is the ones who are really watching those shows, and especially in the South. So the idea of a state loyalty thing, go back in American history, the South is very loyal to their statehood. I lived there for long enough, I can confirm that. And so you could see a lot of that. And yeah, it was very geared towards a bit of country, geared toward their marketing wasn't where it should be. But they did do a lot of good things, like having a K-pop artist from Oklahoma, or the Latin American version of Hurricane representing California. Sweet Taboo, they were amazing. Or an interracial couple representing Alabama, of all places. Like, it hurt my soul to support Alabama, but I liked their song. For Europeans, Alabama is the France of the US. Not that they have a culture, it's that everyone hates them. And so it hurt my soul as a Louisianian to support Alabama. But like, yeah, they did that aspect well, but then just the other aspects were bad marketing in a way, I think.
I think I'm definitely on the end of like, Michigander is in my Twitter bio. So that Michigan is like very into its branding. Which is why I was kind of shocked that they didn't send any like Motown tinged anything next year. Maybe now that more people are aware of it. So let's see. I think we already talked quite a bit about like why we think Americans should watch Eurovision just in our tangents earlier. So I think I'll end on I will end on a possibly very controversial question. Do you think America should or will ever join the main contest a la Australia? Give me your hot takes.
Absolutely not. I don't think Australia should even be there. They're like partly because it's you know how the UK talks about everybody hates us, nobody's going to vote for us. Like at least prior to this year. That would be the thing. Like if the US was in Eurovision, everybody would be like, we don't want them here. We're not going to give them any points. And so it would be like from the national broadcaster perspective, it would be kind of a failure, I feel like. And I'm sure everybody in Europe would be having some feelings about it. And also like I just don't think we quite get what it's about yet. I like part of the fun of Eurovision is seeing like the really specific genre stuff that you only really get there, like the weird Dutch country music. Like you can't I don't want to watch Eurovision for like real country music or stuff that's going to like be super radio friendly, like because honestly I don't like the radio friendly music of right now all that much. Like I watch it for the Schlager and the Dutch country and the like Balkan folk music. And I think that if we stuck the US in there, it would be such a shift like musically that I just think it would be weird. And again, it's called Eurovision. It's for Europe. I don't understand why Australia stuck around. I really don't.
Yeah, no, we should never compete in it. We would not probably want to because the broadcasting of it would be difficult. We talked about earlier, shoving the amount of ads that NBC would want into it and how much it would probably cost them to pay for the EBU to broadcast it over here. They would never do that. But also, yeah, we're kind of I'm not trying to be like America's a punching. We're not. We deservedly should be a punching bag of the world. We've done a lot of bad things. But also, it would be the real everyone hates us. People wouldn't be voting for the US, so it wouldn't look good for the national broadcaster. And then, on top of that, yeah, it's a European song contest. Like, Australia I can forgive because, like, they get it. In 2015, they came in, Guy Sebastian nailed it basically the first try. I think. I love Tonight Again very much so. And, yeah, the US wouldn't get it. They wouldn't send a Valentina Monetta doing 4 different times Spirit of the Night versus Voila, and like, or we wouldn't understand the Verka Serduchkas of the world and all the Wolves of the Sea type camp that happens. We would either go full UK, going Eurovision's only camp, therefore we have to send Electro Velvet, or go, we have to send our biggest artist and then send Beyonce or Rihanna or someone, but then also they fail because Europe would go, we don't want to vote for these massive artists because it's kind of assumed it's for either an artist who's big in your country but not really elsewhere, or like smaller artists. Like you only really get like Pastora Soler as your bigger artists around. So it's not, the contest isn't for the Beyoncés, but we would probably try to send her and then kind of ruin the spirit of the contest in general.
I mean, I remember in 2016, nobody wanted to see Justin Timberlake, and he wasn't even competing.
I apologize for Madonna on behalf of Saginaw, Michigan. Anyways, she will never let people ever know she's from Michigan, but she is. I tend to agree, although I see why people think that the US might do it. If it were ever to happen, it would be at least a decade down the line. I think part of the reason why Australia doesn't seem as out of place as a potential US entry would is because Australia, well, one, colonialism, baby. Commonwealth nation. But two, Australia, I think, has been broadcasting the contest since the 70s. And so there is a real connection to it. So they've been around long enough. The US only just got a broadcaster of some sort 6 years ago, and it was, I don't know if Logo still exists anymore, but basically a network that people really didn't watch.
No one has. Like, they moved Drag Race off of it because it was just so small. No one even watches it, but Drag Race was getting popular, so like no one wants to go on that network.
To VH1 we go. But I also don't know, again, like what we would even send that's like American. I mean, I guess like if it keeps going and they decide, hey, for the 70th anniversary, we're going to have a one-off entry, which I think actually would end up being a one-off entry and not an invite back. Like, I guess whoever wins the American Song Contest would go. Now that I think about it, I wouldn't have been mad at Alexa being at a contest. But, like, it just happened to work out that way. So, I think, I don't think America should be in it. I'm happy for America to broadcast it easily, but I think we take things way too seriously. Again, with like the examples of like American Idol and The Voice, and honestly, even with sports, we take it just way too seriously. We don't really know how to have fun with that type of thing as a country. I think we're not quite ready to be part of that yet. Like I think most nations that go to Eurovision, like it's a competition, but I think for the most part, people tend to be really good sports about it. When they're there, you see all the artists like, you know, like making friendships, and people are still friends like years later. And that's wonderful. I don't think a US delegation would view it that way. I think they would be just like, we want to win. And so I don't think the US right now would be a good fit for the contest. And I think as you both have mentioned, I think deservedly, we really don't deserve to be there at all. But we'll see what happens in about 80 years, or not 80 years, but by the time the 80th anniversary of Eurovision comes around, hopefully. I'm just thinking, because we're coming up on the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, I'm like, we could potentially like be at a point where Eurovision has been broadcasted like nonstop for 100 years, say for a pandemic. And that's wild to think about, because it's been around basically since the dawn of television. You could argue that most American reality singing shows, basically anything that got popular in America in terms of that, would not have been possible without something like a Eurovision Song Contest. And so I think, yeah, we have Eurovision to thank for a lot of things in American culture, even if we don't necessarily think about it. And that's not just ABBA. So we wouldn't have Celine without Eurovision. So thank you for sticking with us. That brings us to the end of another episode of That Eurovision Podcast. I'd like to thank Ben and Shiloh for joining me. It's been a great conversation. Don't forget to follow us on social media at That Euro Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and to also follow That Eurovision site for the latest news. That's at That Euro site on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We have a TikTok. And also thateurovisionsite.com for all of the latest news that our team is working very hard to bring you. We do have lots coming for you in the pipeline, especially as we come closer to Junior Eurovision, National Final Season, and of course the Eurovision Song Contest itself in Liverpool next year. So stay tuned and we'll see you next time. Bye.